Welcome into the final segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast. We are going to be diving into the NFL here. We have had the owners meeting that has taken place over the past couple days, and we will be diving into some of the new rule changes, the first of which being the hip drop tackle. We touched on it briefly the other day, and it is a move that has a lot of people up in arms, so we will get into that. It is the banning of this form of tackle that is, very common in a lot of ways in the NFL, where it is essentially sort of whipping your body and coming down, dropping your weight backwards onto a ball carrier's leg. This has led to a handful of serious injuries over the past couple seasons. Mark Andrews suffered this injury on primetime football earlier this year. That took him out for a lot of the season. We also had Tony Pollard have his season ended in a playoff game a couple years ago against the 49ers. This seemed like it was going to be something that was sort of going to happen one way or another. Jonathan Jones of CBS tweeted out a stat about how there were 230 of these instances in the 2023-24 season, and 15 times the ball carrier missed time due to an injury from the play. Now, that's only 6% of instances, so not a super high number by any means, but we have seen some serious injuries come of it as well. And again, I don't really feel too strongly one way or another as this. I understand the difficulties. It just seems like more and more rules are favoring the offensive players in the NFL, and that can be frustrating, especially to a lot of defenders. But it is something that, the priority for the NFL, other than making money, because that's the way that Roger Goodell thinks, and he's, trying to run his corporation, which again, can't fully blame him for it, but we just know that the NFL is a lot more selfish. It's a lot more run by the owners than it ever will be with the players. But keeping players healthy should be a top concern with them, and we saw a sort of decreased value of the game of football itself when all of the quarterbacks were injured this past year. Not that they were on hip drop tackle plays, but still generally you lose the best players on the field, the game does not look quite as good. So that is sort of a general statement for trying to keep players healthy. Now, could it have implications on defenders and sort of the restrictions on them? We've seen so many different ways that they can go to tackle be outlawed, such as diving at their knees as well, the ball carrier's knees as well. So the job just continues to get harder and harder for defenders in the league. There was a report that was put out about the NFL being concerned about the decrease in scoring the past couple years, and then this new rule comes into place. So there are some concerns about the future of the NFL in that sense, but it is, ideally for the sake of keeping players healthy, so I can understand it. Jonathan Jones reported that it's not likely to be flagged often in this upcoming season. Feel like we could be looking at a warning and then fine situation as they try and phase it out of the game. But, I guess we'll just have to see how the NFL decides to treat it. We're still a handful of months away from that, and it's going to be a storyline to look into. But some news that we got yesterday was the updated kickoff rules. The NFL decided that, last season, the kickoff almost became a pointless play where it was time after time again, kicked out of the back of the end zone, kicked for a touchback, and it was sort of just a nonsense play that meant nothing anymore. And I'm definitely going to miss the traditional kickoffs where just one of the most exciting plays in football and really in all of sports is when you see a kickoff return. Jacoby Jones's return in the Super Bowl against the 49ers was one of the, the first plays that really resonated with me. As a sports fan, I thought it was the coolest thing ever, but it had gotten to a point where there were a couple issues. One, in that the touchback rate was at an all-time high, and two, that there is also, to the note of injury concern, there was some of that with the kickoff rule as well, where we saw a change in the kicking team no longer being able to run up for the kick due to these high-speed collisions that put a lot of people at risk, especially on the blocking front line, as well as some of these, gunners on kickoff as well. So they changed a lot of things up in this situation where now there is a specific incentive for the kickers to try and place their kick in what is called the landing zone. That is from right outside of the other team's end zone to the 20-yard line. If the ball hits the landing zone and is fielded, then the return team is forced to return it. There's no more touchbacks in that sense. But there's a lot of different rules here where the ball is at the 20-yard line if it hits the landing zone and then rolls into the end zone. Again, incentivizing the returners in this situation to actually field the ball and return it themselves. The ball will be at the 35-yard line if the kick goes out of the end zone, which is pretty drastic in my eyes, but again, interesting. It's going to take a lot more precision for some of these kickoff specialists to actually make sure that they hit the zone they're looking for. And if the ball does not reach the landing zone, then the ball will be placed at the 40-yard line. My, first impression of that rule is to try and avoid just booting the ball straight at the front line and trying to, cause some sort of a fumble, like a non-onside kick, onside kick in some sense. But it has to reach the 20-yard line. Being put on the 40 is, again, a little bit extreme. Both the 40 and the 35 in these situations is definitely surprising to me to some degree. But they're trying to make sure that this actually becomes a non-gimmicky real play. It has worked in the XFL up to this point to some degree. Again, just to add some action to a play that has really been dead the past couple of seasons. So I'm not sure how it's totally going to play out. There's also part of it as well is the fact that there's no longer the surprise onside kick. You have to announce to the referees and to the opposing team that you are going to onside kick. Not that this was the most common of, plays to take place during the NFL as it were, but should be interesting. I'm going to have to follow up on trying to figure out some of these rules because where the onside kick really has been diminished over the past couple of years is because when the rule came into place that the kicking team could not have a running head start into the play, it made onside kicks almost impossible, where it just gives the receiving team that much more time to sort of secure the fumble. There's less pressure, and it is... Now we're at a point where I'm not sure if players can still run up on these plays, but the onside kick percentages were extremely low this past season, and the success rate was, there was very few instances of a team kicking an onside kick to actually recover this. There have been some talks about potentially even just removing the onside kick as a whole and trying to set up some sort of 4th and long situation as a replacement. We'll see how the onside kicks work on this season. as it plays out, but is another pretty interesting rule change to this as well. We'll see how all of this plays out. Should be a little bit of an interesting dynamic, trying to get special teams back to be an important part of the game and not really wasting everybody's time with the kickoff, where, again, the highs of the kickoff returns were some of the best moments in football. But last year there was clearly an issue with, there was just no point in running them, essentially, and now the NFL has tried to address that. The final thing from the owners' meeting that sort of stood out to me, we've talked about some of the various, coaching interviews that took place, but the NFL also announced that they're going to be holding a game on Christmas this year, which is not all too, different. They've been having Christmas Eve games the past few years, but what's interesting about this is the fact that Christmas does fall on a Wednesday this season, this year, meaning that whatever teams are participating in this game are going to have very short weeks one way or another. I'm not sure how they're going to line up the scheduling of this, because you talk about playing a game from Sunday to Wednesday. Football is just too dangerous of a sport to, really rush these types of games, and we already hear about some of the complaints about short weeks anyways when you have to play on a Monday and Sunday, let alone, or a Thursday to Sunday, and now we're talking about a Wednesday game. I mean, this could be the future of the NFL. We've seen them flirt with the idea of adding more football games throughout the week, but how are they going to counteract this to make sure that it doesn't become a harmful, indictment to whatever teams are slotted into this game? I'm trying to think on how they could possibly make it work, whether it's they play maybe the Thursday night prior but they can't play the same team either unless they do some sort of no, it doesn't work that way. I'm trying to workshop here on the fly of how they could do it if they were maybe to play a Thursday night game the week before and then maybe a Monday night game the next, but that's 3 straight weeks of these two teams being on a weird schedule. Teams can't play each other 3 times in a row, so we'll see how they decide to work that all out. It is again, maybe a little bit of a glimpse of what is to come in the future of the NFL, because they're trying to monopolize all of sports and have games and viewership, every moment that they possibly can. We'll see how they decide to try and make it work this season, how the players react to it. It just caught my eye as something that was a little more under the radar, but was an interesting look at how it's going to be handled this season and moving forward in the NFL. But that is all the time we have for today. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you to the GSMC Sports Network for allowing us to host this show. Just a reminder to like, follow, subscribe, wherever you keep up with our shows, and we will be back tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock, so we will see you then.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. Nice.